Hello everyone! Welcome to today's video, and in today's video we are going to talk about things you should know before becoming a Jeeper. So what exactly is a Jeeper? Well, that is what we are going to answer. And the answer is, it's anybody who drives a Jeep Wrangler or a Jeep Gladiator. Because I have been a Jeeper, I guess you could say, for a little bit, about 7 months or so. And I have some tips and experience stories to tell you before you become a Jeeper. But of course there are different types of Jeepers out there. You got the stock Jeepers, and then you got the ones with the lifted Jeepers. There's all kinds of Jeepers out there. So being a Jeeper, what's it all about? Well, number one is there's a lot of things you need to consider before becoming a Jeeper. You need to consider if you're able to handle driving a lifted Jeep, or any, if you're capable of driving it on the roads, if you're able to handle it, if you're able to keep up with the maintenance and everything else. You also have to be aware of the etiquette when driving a Wrangler or Gladiator, thus being a Jeeper. Number one is that you have to wave. If somebody's driving in the oncoming direction, they have a Jeep, and they give you a wave like this, then you should wave back. Not doing so could be seen as rude or disrespectful. So always make sure that if you get one of these, you give it right back. And number two is people leaving things on your Jeep, such as ducks. So the first night I parked my Jeep out on public street, I got a duck the next morning. That was the first duck. And then the second duck somebody gave me as a gift from like a festival or something. So that was pretty cool. And another gift was one time I found a piece of bread under my wiper arm, just sitting underneath the wiper arm. Like, what? One time I came out the store and I went up to get ready to leave, and it was actually right before I had my headlights put on, because I had gotten LED headlights for Christmas. And I got a first generation JK, I forgot to mention that. But yeah, I got new LED lights, and the day that I was supposed to get those LED lights on, that's when I found a piece of bread on my windshield. Because right underneath where the wiper is, there was a piece of bread, stale bread, crumbling up, left underneath my wiper arm. And I'm thinking, is somebody mad because my Jeep sits up as high as a GMC Yukon? Or what's the problem here? What's going on? So I look around the parking lot to see if there's any other Jeeps, which I did see one. I'm like, why would somebody leave a piece of moldy bread on my wiper arm for no reason? So then there was a pickup truck, brand newer Silverado, parked next to me, and my Jeep is just about as high. Now let me give the laydown of what my Jeep looks like and is. So, as I said, mine's a first generation JK. So it doesn't have the updated interior as if you got it from 2011 or newer. And, it's just an older JK. It has 31, 32-inch tires on it, and it has stock flares, bumpers, and all. So essentially, when you look at it, it looks like a stock Jeep. You know, just the way that the flares look and everything. But in reality, it's a little bit more higher than a standard Jeep. So it's got a little bit of a lift to it, which makes it up higher than it is if you got a regular one that just got regular tires, which you'd sit lower than a pickup. Mine sits just equal height with the standard, what do they call them? OBS trucks? Yeah, because it sits up as high as a regular truck. Now, of course, if the truck is lifted, you're obviously not going to be as high as them. But if they got a standard truck, you're about as high as them. And I don't know if this guy was pissed that I had one about as high as his truck, and he's like, that Jeep doesn't need to be that high. I'm going to leave a piece of nasty bread on his windshield. So then I posted it on Facebook about it and all, and somebody's like, oh, well, maybe a bird dropped it. A bird did not drop it. If it fell from the sky, it would have bounced off the windshield and would have landed on the ground. Somebody placed it underneath there. Now, I also have a second theory to that. The night prior, I was at someone's house, and a group of guys were walking down an alleyway. They looked to be like athletes or something. And I guess maybe one of them decided to put a piece of bread there because they're like, oh, where do I put this piece of bread? Oh, I guess I'll just put it on this random Jeep. Because you want to know why? It's a Jeep. That's a theory of mine. I don't know which is proven. But I do know that somebody put a piece of bread there. So that was really weird. Should you allow a new driver, first vehicle ever, to drive a lifted JK? Probably not. Because the thing about it is with the Jeeps and the JKs is that they don't ride very smooth. When I first got mine, I literally on the test drive, I had a heck of a time. Because with the wheels and the wind and the suspension and all, it can make it challenging. Especially when it's pretty slow going uphill. So I was test driving it, and I was going uphill, and I couldn't go all that fast. And then as I was going up the hill, I just had a hard time staying in the lane because of the wind and the bumps in the roads and the curves and all. And the person riding in the back seat was talking to the guy in front and had a nervousness in their voice, like, oh my gosh, Tristan's driving that, and I'm just nervous as heck. Yeah. And I was about ready to say, well, I'm about ready to pull over because I can't. I'm like, what's going on here with the pulling around and stuff? So evidently, I had looked into the pulling aroundness, and as it turned out, I had a worn caliper, and this caliper had worn out my brakes. And so we took it into the shop, and they're like, well, the brakes are completely worn out, so they put new rotors on, new brakes. Well, then literally a few days after leaving the shop, I went to go somewhere, and my brakes overheated on the one side because I had a bad caliper, and it was not releasing, so they had to replace that. So that was about $600 in total just for the brake stuff and all. Then I had to take it in again because I had issues with something else. But yeah, it was a trip. Now going back to the headlights story. So the same day I got the headlights in, I was like, holy crap, these lights are bright, you know? And I was worried that they were going to be too bright to the point to where you'd have to have them taken out. And evidently, it's because of the Jeep sitting up higher and the alignment with the lights and all. Because it looks like your high beams are on, but they're not actually on. Because one time I was driving at night in the fog, and I got flashed. Now, ever since then, I've driven it with the lights and all. Never gotten flash since then. So, maybe the person just thought I had my high beams on because they were just so bright. But yeah, that's something you should know about. If you do get aftermarket LED lights or anything like that, make sure that they're not too bright because you could have them taken out. And yeah. When you drive over bumps, when you drive around corners, anything, it's going to be rough. When you drive over a bunch of potholes and bumps, your steering's vibrating from side to side. And when you need to go around corners, it's not the best at cornering. So you end up having to not be able to make the turn too good. You know? And you end up having to drive slower and stuff. So that's why, you know, you should keep that in consideration. Number 2 is the braking. If you've got an older JK or anything like that, you slam on the brakes really suddenly, your brakes might lock up and you might not be able to stop. And, well, that's what's happened to me one time. So you definitely want to prepare to brake sooner. Now, if you don't want any of those problems, then I suggest that you don't put big tires on your Jeep or anything like that, because that's the problems that you're looking at. You're looking at wandering steering and the suspension. Sometimes if you go around bumpy hills and stuff, the suspension can rock your cab around, which can also mess with your steering as well. And it's pretty hard not to touch the lines when you're on the road because of how it drives, especially if you drive on the interstate. If you drive on the interstate, it's this the entire time. You at 60 miles an hour because of the vibrations in the steering. Now, of course, it might be the steering problems, but it's just something you just have to get used to. I've had to get used to it, so should you. But would I recommend giving a Jeep to a brand new driver? Absolutely not. Definitely do not. If you have issues maintaining a regular car on the road and keeping it in its lanes, then you probably shouldn't drive a Jeep Wrangler. Now, of course, there are a lot of people out there who are very confident in their driving, and there are people who are not. So realistically, it all comes down to your experience and how well you can drive it. But if you're not very good at driving it, I wouldn't recommend getting one, unless you're going to actually be able to handle it, because let me tell you, it is difficult to handle with the big lifted tires. So don't have a Jeep Wrangler just to have one. As I've said, you have to make sure you can handle it, you can keep up with its repairs, you know, all that stuff. And you obviously have to be able to keep up with the waving as well. Because if you don't wave, that, you know, as I've said, they don't take it too kindly. Especially if it's a die-hard Jeeper, you know, they might get pretty ticked off at you. Now, here's another thing. When you buy your Jeep and it's stock, you have the option to put on a bunch of aftermarket stuff. And people will actually encourage you to do this. They want you to buy every aftermarket thing you can buy, which can cost thousands of dollars. But you have to determine if it's worth it to do it on your specific Jeep. Like, if your Jeep has a lot of miles on it, you probably wouldn't want to do that because you're putting all brand new parts on a Jeep that already has, let's say, 150,000 miles on it. You know? And that's your determination. If that's something that you want to do, is put a whole bunch of aftermarket stuff on, you know, that's at your discretion. So, what should you choose, a 2-door or a 4-door? Well, if you want a 2-door, you only have 2 choices. You can either drive around backseat passengers, or you can have stuff in the back. Those are only two options. I'd recommend a two-door if you plan on using it for just off-roading. You don't plan to have any passengers in it. You don't plan to have it as a main vehicle to be transporting around a bunch of passengers. Otherwise, you'd want a four-door. Because I've had two doors, and it's not fun when you gotta haul around a bunch of stuff and you can't get the back seat to fold down because the lever thing is stuck, and you end up, yeah. And this was on a 2012 Wrangler, two-door. But on the bright side, at least it drove smooth. But yeah. Many of you are wondering about the Ford Bronco. Is it better than the Wrangler? This, that, and the other. Well, let me tell you, as somebody who rides in a Bronco on most occasions, it is definitely 10 times more smoother than a JK. It's got much more smoother handling. And the thing about it is, it has 35-inch tires. And mine has 32-inch tires, and it's pretty hard to maintain on the road. So yeah, so that definitely says quite a lot about the difference between a Bronco and a Wrangler. Now, the Bronco's obviously nicer. It's practically an F-150 changed into a giant Jeep, essentially. That's basically the best way I can describe it. It is luxurious and it is expensive, but it's wide, it's bigger, and it's more expensive. But it also handles a lot better than if you got a regular Jeep. And there's more room. Now I can't say much about the JLs. I don't know much about the JLs. All I know is the JKs. So anything that's from a JL down, that's a mystery. But I can tell you that JKs are tremendously different than if you got a Ford Bronco. Ford Bronco has everything built in. With a Jeep, you have to put things in. Because the JKs don't come with grab handles. So if yours doesn't have them, you'd obviously have to spend $20, maybe $40 if you got it, if you need it, put in the back, in front. So that way your passengers can get in and out without struggling to get in, depending on your tires and whatnot. You know, something I saw on a Facebook page, so with the Bronco is, you know, someone said, oh, I got 35-inch tires on my Bronco, you know, mine can handle potholes. And somebody said, oh, so you're the one tearing up all the dirt roads, LOL. Like, this guy's jealous over a Bronco. Because you want to know why? It's expensive. It's, like I said, it's an F-150 turned into a Jeep. Ford Expedition. It's wider, it's bigger, more expensive. So, yeah. So if you got a Bronco, you're under that spotlight of having people envy you just because of your vehicle. Because let me tell you a story. One time, we were in the Bronco, right? And we were going up the street. And this guy, looks to be around my age, was getting out of this work truck thing. And he goes and gives a smirk at the person driving the Bronco. And the person driving the Bronco has the back windows taken out. So as we're passing, I hear this guy give a smirk and then he goes, that guy's a D. And we're like, how do you know this guy driving the Bronco? You don't know him. How do you know he's a D? Well, that's because he's the only one around that has an iconic looking Bronco. And, yeah. An iconic looking Bronco. But now, people are just like, oh my gosh, we're going to be all jealous of this guy. Yeah. So, And I'm just giving that insight because how many people do you know that has a Bronco and who has Jeeps as well? How would you know? So that's why I'm giving you guys this insight of the Ford Bronco in case you are considering of getting one. If you do get one, you might have some benefits in comparison to an older JK. But on the other end, you're going to have people jealous of you, envy you, because you have one. $60-some thousand for a brand new one. Estimated cost. But is it worth it? That's up to you. But yeah, this is what it is. They're now taking Jeeps that were originally the #1 Jeep, and they've turned it into Ford's version of a Jeep Wrangler, which remains to be seen if it is better with off-roading. But some people don't think so. Now, another thing I want to let you know if you plan to become a Jeeper is you're going to be at a higher standard on the road than if you were driving a regular car. And let me tell you this. So one time I was driving, and maybe like a mile or two over the speed limit, and there was a trooper that was on the other side with his radar gun, and he had the radar gun pointed like this. So as I was passing him, he went and put the radar gun out the window like he was going to pull me over, because he knows that a Jeep is bigger, heavier, doesn't stop on a dime. It's essentially a sports car in a lot of people's eyes. It may not be as fast as a muscle car or anything like that, but it is considered a sports car. So you're going to be at a higher level standard, and people are just gonna drive how they normally drive around you. One time I was on the road, and there was this lady that was behind me, and she was driving a little car, and there was a car on the other end that was looking like they were about ready to make a U-turn right in front of me, so I put on the brakes. But if I had slammed on the brakes, I could have gotten rear-ended because I was being tailgated. And, you know, and the thing that really aggravates me when people at night and somebody's got an SUV, a lower SUV or sedan, they get so close to you that you can't even see them in the rearview mirror because they're being blocked by the spare tire. And like, why do people get so daggone close? You can't see them. You know, you just see just a glare on the back window, and that's all you see. You don't see anything else. So if you ever need to reverse, you won't know they're there because they're so daggone close. But yeah, it's not very wise to get that close, because if your car hits the back of it, it can do some damage to the Jeep, of course, but it will also do a lot more damage to whoever hits you. And especially if you have those aftermarket metal bumpers, those will definitely destroy someone's car if you hit them. So like I said, you're going to be at a higher standard. You know, you need to watch out for things like that, because, you know, cops are going to be watching and make sure you're following the traffic laws because you're driving a bigger vehicle and stuff. You got to be careful. You can either get a hard top, soft top, or the power top, which is known as the Freedom Top. That's an aftermarket thing that you can put on JKs, but it also comes standard on newer Jeeps now. So that is what I would ultimately recommend, because hard tops are a absolute pain. Let me tell you. Because you want to know why it's a pain? You have to unscrew these two bolts that are in the middle of where your light is, where your roll cage is. You have to unscrew those out, and those are pretty good. You got to unscrew those out, and then you got to take off the clips, you know, undo all the clips, and then you got to lift it up and over. And it's pretty heavy to lift, especially if your Jeep is lifted, of course. It's pretty heavy to lift. And so you have to take those off, put those in the back seats with the seats folded down, because if you put them on the floor facing upwards, you're not going to have enough room, and if you close the door, you're going to scratch the door. It's just going to scratch it all up, and it's just a pain. So you're better off just folding down your seats and just putting it in the back. You know, bada bing, bada boom. There you go. But that's not where it ends there. To take off the entire back, you have to undo bolts and all kinds of stuff. And it's a real pain to have to keep putting on and off. So if you're going to take your back off, you'd have to store it somewhere. And plan on keeping it off if it's a really nice day or whatever. Because it is a pain to have to constantly put on and off, on and off. And yeah, it's a pain. So if you plan to have the top off your Jeep all the time in the summertime, definitely either get a soft top or the Freedom top. You know, it would make it easier. That way you don't have to constantly take the top off and, you know, have to screw it all in and stuff. Now, will people specifically react differently if you have a Jeep? Well, maybe, maybe not. Ever since I started getting mine, I was more aware of people's reactions on the road, and there are people that will, as they are passing you, they will look specifically at you because they want to know who's driving that. If it's some hot person driving it or whatever. So yeah, so if you're going to be driving a Jeep that is not stock, definitely not stock, you're going to have more people looking. Not at your Jeep, but at you. Because I've had some pretty weird stuff happen. Now, not only that, but you're also going to cause the Karens as well. So one time I had a Karen. I was trying to pull into a parking space, right? And I was backing up. And right as I was getting ready to pull back into the space, this Karen with a shopping cart deliberately just comes right in front of me. I'm like, seriously? You can't see? You couldn't just wait or go behind or take it away? You had to cut right in front of me. Not even look at me like I'm not even there. Well, whatever. And, you know, you also get, like, one time there was a lady, I was going up an alleyway or something, and a lady was trying to get out of my way or something, and I waved at her, and she didn't, even, like, had this sarcastic look like, which way you trying to go, you know, kind of crap. So yeah, that's kind of stuff that you'd have to deal with, and then you get people giving you the mean stare just for no reason, you know, all kinds of crap. So yeah, if you definitely do get a Jeep, definitely pay attention to your surroundings and how other people react, because it is quite hilarious with how people react. Like one time, I was backing out of a parking space and this woman was walking, and you know, she was more like kind of in my blind spot, and you know, as I was looking, she was just kind of standing there, flicking her hair back or whatever, I guess, trying to be all, I guess, flirtatious, I guess. But I don't know if that was the case or not, but I'm like, why are you standing there? Why, what is going on here? So yeah. Now going back to the Karens, one time I was at a car wash, waiting in line for the car wash, and I didn't get out and get that sponge thing that people put on their tires. So this lady comes up, and she has this older Volkswagen, and she comes up, and she says something, but I didn't hear what she said, and she was bent over and picked up the bucket. I'm like, okay, I guess you just figured I'm not going to use it, so you're just going to go ahead and use it anyway, but Oh well. So yeah, so you definitely gotta be aware of the Karens. You might also bring out some Karens as well. So yeah, just keep that in mind. So I'm also going to talk about previous owner, what their experience was with the JK. So this previous owner, I bought it. I'm not going to say where I got it from, but the previous owner had sold it to me, and he had said that his son was driving that, and that's why they got the bigger tires. And he says, "Oh, I was gonna get smaller tires put on," and you know, we're like, "Well, there ain't no point on doing that now," you know, and and he's like, well, it had the old fogged up lights and stuff like that. So sometimes when people sell their Jeeps, they may take off the aftermarket stuff and put all the old stuff back on and sell it like that. I don't know if that was the case with the previous owner, if it previously had aftermarket stuff and then they took it all out and put the old stuff back in. We don't know that. I don't think so, but that could be a possibility with if you do buy one that's used. And so, yeah. I don't know if that's the case, but we don't know. But I do know that there's some aftermarket suspension and stuff like that put on. But other than that, I don't know. And you have to be careful with aftermarket upgrades. You absolutely have to be careful with aftermarket upgrades. Because some aftermarket upgrades violate the DOT. And if that violates the DOT, then guess who's going to be getting pulled over? You. Because if something is illegal aftermarket on your car, law enforcement agencies can get you for it. And they will write you an order having you take it off, or they might impound your car. So it's very important to check the laws on aftermarket stuff, because if it's illegal and not DOT approved or whatever, that can come back on you. And it won't come back on the people that installed it, because those people install it anyway. If you go out to a custom shop and the states, you have to only have like 95% light transmittance in a state, and they install 1% tint, and you're like, oh, well, isn't it illegal in this state to have 1% tint? And like, yeah, what's your point? And yeah, so you have to be careful with that. Even though that they're not going to volunteer the information and say, oh, well, that's illegal to put on your car. We're not going to do it for you, sir. Should you deck your Jeep out to make it look like an army Jeep and all? So let me tell you, like I said, it's up to you if you want to deck your Jeep out. You don't have to. But a lot of people are going to encourage it. They're going to want you to get those fender flares that are skinny. They're going to want you to get the flares that have the lights on them as well, or anything in that nature. People are going to want you to deck it out. Now, the more distinctive your Jeep looks, the more easily recognizable it is. So keep that in mind as well. You have got to keep in mind that the more decked out it looks, the more easily recognizable it looks, and the more attention it's going to get. Because if somebody sees a random Jeep with regular taillights, regular everything, they're not going to give it any special attention. What they will give special attention is if it's completely decked out, and that would get it special attention. But people might come up and they'd want to buy it or something. And here's what your response should be. Are you able to handle something like that? Are you able to handle driving a lifted Jeep on windy country roads where the steering's constantly fighting you, making you think that you have a bad alignment, which it's not. It's the steering or the tires, one of the two. If it's the tires, it's just something you have to get used to. But I would not recommend putting big tires on unless you are going to plan on using it as an off-road vehicle. The more off-road capable you make your Jeep, the less of a daily driver it becomes. So if you want to use a Jeep as a daily driver, I'd recommend putting tiny 29-inch tires on, so that way you don't constantly pull around on the road and you get, better gas mileage. If you do, you're just going to have to deal with it and off-road at your discretion. Now, with my 32-inch tires, would I be able to off-road? Probably, but would I be able to go mudding? No. Because I found out the hard way. I was on gravel, and it was snowy. There was maybe 8 inches of snow. I got stuck in rear-wheel drive. So I had to put it in four-wheel drive, and I almost got stuck again. So, yeah, that was pretty hectic. And, yeah. So, yeah, if you want to have better traction and not get stuck, you'd have to get bigger tires and stuff in order for that to happen. Otherwise, you will get stuck pretty easily if you have the smaller tires. Understand, if Jeep Wranglers were so easy to drive and stuff, you think everybody would be having them. But they're not. You either got a choice. You can either have a lifted Jeep, rough handling and all, or you can drive a regular tiny car where if you get stuck, you're stuck. You can't get unstuck. It just really depends on what you're looking for. But if you're looking for a Jeep that would handle smooth, I'd recommend getting the Jeep Grand Cherokee, because it's designed to be smoother. Wranglers are not. And, yeah, it's not for any kind of luxurious driving at all. Unless you got a Bronco, it might be better. If you pay that 60-some grand, and, and if you can handle driving a big, wide vehicle, that's up to you. But yeah, it's certainly a lot to think about. It's not so simple. There is no wave or anything for Broncos. I don't know. Other Jeep drivers do not wave at Broncos. Other Broncos don't wave at other Broncos. It's more expensive and more newer, but it's not like the Jeeps. It is like the Jeeps, but from what I've experienced with riding around in one and everybody, is that a lot of people are jealous if you've got one. They're jealous, they envy you, they know who you are. The nicer it looks, the more distinctive it looks, the more people notice. And I went from driving an old Plymouth van to driving a Jeep. Now, of course, you might be asking, well, what is up with this Plymouth van? So I still have it. It's a 91 Plymouth Voyager. Now that exact car came in 3 different models, exactly the same. Dodge, Town and Country, and then the Voyager. And I compared it, I called it the Jeep van, when in reality it's nothing in comparison to a Jeep. If you're going to compare that van to another vehicle, it'd probably be a Dodge Ram, because that does not drive like a Jeep. It may have a little bit rough handling with rattling and stuff like that, but it is not anything by any means a Jeep. It's more like a Dodge Charger or Dodge Durango or older Dodge. But people have it underappreciated because it's a Dodge Grand Caravan. And we all know what a Dodge Grand Caravan looks like. People are not too highly of them because, well, it's a long minivan. What's so exciting about that? Well, maybe the fact that it has a significant horsepower and is old and is underappreciated. So yeah, I just figured I'd throw that out there. You don't want that to go to waste too. If you're looking for a fun vehicle, look for them old Voyagers if you can find one. Because, well, That's it right there. But it's not the most visually appealing van, but it certainly has its own quirks and features they may not know of. And, you know, I've had people stare at me in it and stuff, think I'm some crazy person because it's older looking in the front and stuff, but hey, it's probably one of the last of an era, you know, but yeah, those are the things that you need to be aware of before you're being a Jeeper. Rough riding. I mean, you guys know this. If you're watching this video, chances are you've already known everything I've talked about. And chances are you're already a Jeeper yourself if you're watching this video. So yeah. So all I'm saying is that make sure that you know these things before just buying a Jeep. Because you may want one, but it depends if you can actually handle one. So yeah. There's quite a lot to be considered before just buying one, you know. You might think you're some super car guy driving a BMW, you know, but that doesn't mean you can handle driving a BMW where you're having to constantly hold the steering together when you're on the interstate. And if you do, then you got problems with your car's alignment or something because, well, I can't think of any other vehicle out there that would drive like a Jeep JK does. Now, like I said, I can't speak for the JLs. Eventually, you know, people will learn about the JLs and they'll be able to determine if it's better than the JKs. But all I'm saying is that if you do buy a JK, especially if it's first generation, you're going to have the things I just talked about. So yeah, don't buy a Jeep Wrangler unless you intend to use it what it's meant for. It's like having a waterproof camera and using that for daily vlogging, you know? It just depends on what it's good for. You know what I mean? You want to make sure that you're able to handle that Jeep. Don't buy one just because you want one. Buy one so that way you intend to use it like it's meant to be used instead of using it as an all-daily driver with big lifted tires and expect that, you know, you're going to make it to your destination easy peasy. If you're not able to do the waves, if you're not able to deal with the ducks, deal with all the things that comes with being a Jeeper, then you probably shouldn't be a Jeeper. And my recommendation, if you can't become a Jeeper, to just buy a Jeep Grand Cherokee, where you got smoother handling, or just buy something else. But yeah, those are the tips, because if I'm telling you, if you are not aware of these things and you buy a Jeep for the first time and you go driving on a windy road or on the interstate for the very first time, it's not going to be too easy. So you're better off just learning how to drive first and then getting a Jeep when you're ready to. Well, anyway, guys, that is it for today's video. Make sure that you guys like, that you guys comment, you guys subscribe, and I will see you in another video. See ya.